you've experienced this cyberbullying. I'm just so impressed that you came out on the other side and you wrote this book. What are some of the tips that you'd have for parents?
My biggest piece of advice would just be to monitor their usage. I don't think that they should come on super strong. I think you really need to find a balance, because if you don't do anything about it, then it can spiral out of control. If parents are overbearing and get too involved, then it could also go the other way and just continue to get worse.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Landscaper's Guide podcast. Now, normally we interview landscape company owners about sales, marketing, and leadership, but today I have a special guest. Her name is Ashley Parker, and she is currently a high school student. She's going to graduate in the year of 2026, and she's the daughter of my client, Scott Parker, from Parker Landscape Design in Warren, New Jersey. When I heard of Ashley's story, I was like, cool, Ashley should come on the podcast. I want to talk to her. So Ashley, I'm excited to have you today. Ashley has written the book, Sasha Goes to Cyberspace, which is about cyberbullying. And, you know, I'm a dad. I have two young boys. I know a lot of our listeners have kids. So Ashley, thanks for coming on the Landscaper's Guide podcast to talk about this important topic.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us, what is Sasha Goes to Cyberspace?
Sasha Goes to Cyberspace is a children's book, a picture book on cyberbullying, and it's very engaging, and it has a lot of different colors and different elements to ultimately engage elementary school students, to help them learn about what cyberbullying is from a young age before they receive technology.
That's great. And so tell me, what was some of your experience with cyberbullying?
I think, like any teenager and middle schooler, when you get a phone, it's obviously very new and exciting. And I mean, at least in my experience, I didn't learn a lot about technology from a young age because a lot of the platforms were so new. So when I first received a phone, a lot of my friends and I were downloading all the social media we had access to, and we didn't really know the risks that came with it. So my friends and I experienced some of the negative effects of social media.
Yeah, I'm curious. So how old were you when you got a phone and when you started using social media?
I was 10 years old when I got a phone. I was in fifth grade.
Okay. And so what were some of the apps that you got?
I had Snapchat. At the time I had Musically, which is now TikTok. I had Instagram. I had Roblox, and there was an app called House Party, which was like FaceTime.
Okay. And so you originally started connecting with friends, and how old were you when you felt like maybe things were off track, or, you didn't like what was happening?
I would say when I was in middle school, specifically sixth grade, I started to see some of the negative effects, because middle school is generally known for being the time where most kids experience bullying. But over social media, it just makes it a lot worse, because people aren't face to face and they can say whatever they want and think that it's okay because they're hiding behind a screen.
What are some of the things that people were saying or doing that you saw happen?
I mean, I saw a wide range of things. I saw a lot of stuff happening to other people and their pictures being sent around without their consent, a lot of negative messages. In my experience, I received a lot of negative text messages, and to this day, I still see people being mean over social media and criticizing people on the public internet.
Part of your book, I'm not going to give away the whole story, but part of it does involve someone having pictures of them being posted online. Tell me more about, did that happen to you or somebody you know?
I mean, I think anyone has a lot of people have experienced this, where people post pictures without your consent, and especially now with AI, pictures can get morphed, and even you see celebrities online and their pictures are being changed and they're saying stuff that they never said, and it's getting posted. So, I mean, I experienced it where there were pictures of me that were sent that I didn't consent to, but I know I've seen, like I said, to this day, a lot of people have a negative experience with it.
So this started in middle school, and how long did it go on?
I would say pretty much throughout middle school. And when I was younger, I really didn't know how to deal with it because I was so young. I was 10 years old when I first received a phone. But I would say as I started to get into high school, in my experience, it started to stop because I knew how to deal with it.
What advice, I was curious, for would you have for parents listening out of the gate? What kind of, you are 16 and you've experienced this cyberbullying, and I'm just so impressed that you came out on the other side and you wrote this book and you're advocating around it. What are some of the tips that you'd have for parents?
My advice for parents would be to just monitor your children's social media usage and the platforms they're using. And I do think that technology and social media can be a really great tool when used properly. But my biggest piece of advice would just be to monitor their usage and make sure if there is any negative contact going on to intervene and try to stop it.
I'm curious, how old do you think kids should be before they have social media?
I think in terms of having a phone, I think a phone is a great tool because when kids stay home alone, they need a way to contact their parents. But I think social media, I think a good age would probably be going into high school because middle school kids are so vulnerable and it's such a hard time already. And kids are transitioning and trying to figure out how to handle their social life and schoolwork. But I think going into high school would be a better time. I don't think there's ever an amazing time because at any given time you can experience the negative effects.
So when they're getting into high school, though, is maybe a better time to have access to actual social media. What about things like texting and stuff like that with friends?
I mean, everything in moderation. I think texts are okay because, at least for me, that's a way that I communicate with my friends who live in different areas and my parents. But I think as long as they're used properly and monitored, especially if kids are texting from a young age, then it needs to be monitored.
What about what advice would you have for parents whose kids are being bullied? What How do you deal with it?
I think that parents should I don't think that they should come on super strong. I think you really need to find a balance because if you don't do anything about it, then it can spiral out of control. But I think that if parents are overbearing and get too involved, then it could also go the other way and just continue to get worse. So I think that parents should really keep on top of their children and make sure that they're okay and just guide them in a way that's not overbearing, but also help diffuse the situation.
Let's pretend that somebody's listening, they're aware that their kids are being bullied. Or what would you share with, somebody who's in middle school or high school who's being cyberbullied? How should they respond to it? Should they ignore it? What do you think about how to handle it?
I mean, this is always the general question. I think it really depends on the situation, but I think that adding fuel to the fire isn't necessarily a good way to deal with it. With my experience, the best way is to just kind of back away. And at the end of the day, you just need to put the technology down and socialize with people who care about you face to face because that avoids a lot of the unnecessary conflicts. But, obviously social media is a huge part of our society today. So I would say just to eliminate as much negativity as possible and limit your circle to people who you know are kind and care about you.
I like that. What inspired you to write the book?
What inspired me to write the book was that there aren't any children's books on cyberbullying. And when I was younger in elementary school, I learned about what people consider like the typical bullying, which is face to face. And I read books, children's books on what not to do, like physically bullying or verbally bullying, but I never learned anything about cyberbullying. And I think that it would have been really beneficial to me as a young kid because it's already such a tough concept to grasp that people can communicate through a screen. I wrote it to educate younger children about social media and what it is and the ways to handle it before they receive a phone.
And how did you tell me more about how you actually wrote it? So it's a picture book. How did you make the and you did the illustrations yourself, right?
Yes.
What program did you use? Did you draw them on paper first and then make them on your computer? Or tell me a little bit about your writing process.
So I actually did an independent study through my school, and I started by researching cyberbullying because obviously I'm in high school and there's just so many different aspects of it. So I researched about it and then I started to create the plot I wanted for my story. I was trying to find a way to convey the message to young kids, which I would say is one of the most difficult parts because, like I said, cyberspace isn't a physical place and it's so hard for young children to comprehend. So I thought of having the book take place in outer space, which is similar. Like we've never gone to outer space. Like little kids have never gone to outer space. So I thought that would be easier for them to grasp the concept. And then from there, I wrote the whole book and I did all the dialogue and then I made the pictures um, to match each set of words. And then from there, I drew all the pictures on Procreate, which is a digital drawing platform. It took a while, but I self-published the book through a company called Book Baby.
That's cool. So can people buy a print version of it or just digital or what's available?
They can buy a print version.
So what are you hoping to do with the book? So you've done this and then you even built ashleybparker.com. So you figured out how to self-publish your book. You made a little website to promote it. I see you've had a couple other podcast interviews. What are you hoping to do with the book next?
Um, I'm hoping to go back to my elementary school and read it to the younger kids. I'm also going to try to create the book in Spanish just to reach a wider audience. But my ultimate goal is to just raise as much awareness for kids and make sure that they're prepared before they get a phone and they know how to deal with some of the negative consequences so they don't have to have a similar experience to a lot of the kids in my generation.
Cool. Well, I'm really impressed with what you're doing with it. I love the idea of making a Spanish version. What questions do you have for me?
I think one of my questions would be, what was your experience with writing a book? Because I know it's a little different than mine. It's not a children's book, and how that process went for you. Because at least for myself, I know it was a very long process and it took a lot of time.
Yeah, well, so I've written two books, and the first one came out in 2018, and it took me several years to write, partly because I had just had two kids, and they were under 2 years old. They were both under two at the same time. So that was the inspiration for me to write the book, was in part, I knew that it was what I needed to do to grow my career and to grow my business to provide for my family. And I had seen a public speaker, Dan Kennedy, he's my favorite author, and part of his whole platform was becoming an expert in your topic, writing a book, and then doing public speaking. So a lot of my experience in writing it was helping clients prioritize their marketing. I found that I was often having to educate my clients about the same things over and over again. And over the years, I made this like giant PDF, like this giant document that had things, and I would often draw a graphic, the foundation of digital marketing for people, and eventually I had a designer brand it, and I realized, wow, I should write a book and share this with people. So some of my process for writing the book was writing an outline on paper, and I still write this way. I'm taking notes right now. It just helps me focus. It's just how I operate. So I outlined a lot of it on paper, and then I would make Apple notes for each chapter, and I would then just voice dictate into these Apple notes, and then later go and edit them in Google Docs. So that's how I wrote my first two books, was taking those things. My second book, I included a lot of transcripts from podcast interviews like this. So I do a ton of video content creation, and I would transcribe it and then edit the text from those transcripts. I'm currently writing my third book right now, and one tool that wasn't really even a consideration for the first two was AI. So I'm actually using AI quite a bit to write my books. And recently I hand wrote the outline of a chapter, and then I made a video like I was talking to someone. And then I took the transcript of the video and put it through ChatGPT using transcripts of my other books. And it got me a first draft in like minutes. What would have taken me hours years ago. What was interesting was that first chapter was really good and really close to being done because it was using, I had literally uploaded both of my other books, which were like 40,000 words long each. So it had 80,000 plus words of content to take this new idea for me and edit it into new content.
One of my other ideas was to actually write another children's book on AI because there's also no books about AI, and it's such a complex system that even I need to do a lot of research on because there's just so many different aspects and some of it confuses me. But my other question for you would be, I'm taking my first marketing class right now. So what's your biggest piece of marketing and advertising advice?
There's a lot of different skills to develop. There's writing skills, there's strategy skills, there's website design, there's development, there's AI. There's a lot of like tactical things, video editing, shooting video. And then there's personal branding, right? So what you're doing by already having ashleybparker.com is a huge advantage to you. So I would encourage you to keep going, keep doing what you're doing. And as you learn new skills, put them on your website. You know, a lot of times when I'm interviewing potential employees, people who have a website stand out so much further ahead from people who don't have a website or who don't have a LinkedIn. And so you've already got a head start on building your personal brand, if you will. And that personal brand will continue with you, whether you're an employee or someday you own your own business or whatever it is. And then also to take opportunities. So some of the opportunities that I took when I was 16 that shaped who I am today, I wrote for the school newspaper. And that was a really great experience because I needed to meet deadlines and I needed to collaborate with other people and I needed to have other people edit me and be okay with somebody else editing my stuff and putting it in the newspaper or getting a photo for it. So all of those things ended up being marketing skills that I didn't even realize I was developing. I worked at a garden center when I was 16, and that's how I realized I like the landscape industry. I enjoy people who grow plants. I just connect with them, and that was just taking an opportunity that came to me. So sometimes I think people are waiting for the perfect opportunity or it needs to be the best thing, and I think a lot of times you need to just go do it, learn from it, and keep going.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm actually one of the editors for my school newspaper. So I definitely agree with that.
What section do you edit?
I edit the art section.
That's cool. I wrote for the entertainment and arts section. That was a really great experience because I got to interview people who were professional musicians because that's what I thought I wanted to do someday, was play in a band. And I interviewed all these people and I wrote about them, and then I went for it and realized I actually didn't want to either be a professional musician or a professional journalist. But what I took from it was a lot of skills that now help me do, what I do today.
Yeah, 100% agree.
What interests you about marketing? Why are you studying it, and what are you curious about?
From seeing my dad and his company, I know how marketing can make and advertising can make such a large impact. And what interests me the most is the algorithms behind it. And when you go and Google landscapers in New Jersey, like how to market yourself so that you're one of the first ones who pops up. And when you click on the images tab in Google, um, how like someone can have their pictures pop up automatically, and how that really makes or breaks a company.
Yeah, I find that very fascinating too. And it was actually something that I resisted for a while. Meaning, when I wrote for a newspaper and a print newspaper, when people started asking me, like, hey, are you going to put these keywords in your writing? I thought, no, like that's ruining writing, it's ruining language and blah, 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 blah. But then I realized that that's how people find information. And by not using keywords, I wasn't helping anyone. I was only just making my content not found online. And once I started to learn SEO, search engine optimization, I found an interest and a desire to use those keywords in a way that still sounded really good when people read it. And all of those things led me to learn the skills that you're talking about, like how to name an image file when you upload it to your website. It has a big difference on how it's found, and how to name it in your website, and how to title your pages so people find it. Those are all different skills that you can learn and develop over time.
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, like when I go and Google something when I'm doing a research project, like at least for the convenience factor, like if it's the first thing that pops up, my eye automatically is drawn towards it, and it's going to be one of the first things I click on. So I definitely see how that can make such a big difference in someone's company and how many people are drawn to their website.
One other thing I'd tell you is that done beats perfect. And what I mean by that is your book is done. I don't know if you think it's perfect or not, but it's done and people can buy it. And my books are done and people can buy them, and they are not perfect. There are problems and mistakes in there. A lot of people get hung up on making things perfect, and they never release them. They never publish their book. They never publish the blog post on their website. They never finish their podcast or whatever it is. And I think in business, getting things done will always beat getting things perfect. So, your idea of writing a book about AI, go do it. And it might be out of date in a year. It will be, because AI is going to change so much. But the fact that you got it done is significant.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because, like, when I first had the idea to write this book, obviously, being a teenage girl, the first thing that runs through your head is, like, what are other people going to think about it? And my parents have always had just really good advice, and they've always told me that, if you're going to wait around and look for others to, like, praise what you've done, like, you're going to always be waiting, and you just have to, follow your passion and not worry about what other people think. And I really I'm typically on the quieter side, but this was something I was really passionate about, and I really wanted to help make a difference. And so I worked really hard, and I published the book, and I told a lot of people about it, which I definitely came out of my shell a little bit, but it's for such a good cause that I wasn't going to hold myself back and ultimately not help others. So
Well, good job getting it done. And it also doesn't mean that you don't keep getting better at what you do. So like my first book is done and it helped me get to the next step. I wrote my second book. The second book is better than the first book, and my third book I'm really excited about. It's going to be even better than the first two. But if I had never finished the first two, I wouldn't be at this point. So I think there's like always wanting to get better and keep growing your skill, and also getting things done. So, Ashley, I read your book, and um, it ends with a message of forgiveness. Tell me about that.
I mean, I think since children are the intended audience for this book, personally, I always think that forgiveness is 99% of the time the way to go, because people can change and people do make mistakes. I make a ton of mistakes. And um, I think that over social media, people can make very large mistakes that have a really negative impact on other people. But at the end of the day, if they can realize the mistakes that they've made and they show that they do care about you, like you can forgive people. And obviously, it might take some time, but there, I would say forgiveness is one of the key things because I've always been the type of person to not hold grudges. And I think, people do make mistakes. And especially over social media, a lot of people don't realize how, when you post a picture, it's out there forever. So I do see the value in forgiveness.
That's amazing.
I know you said that you worked at a garden center when you were younger, but why did you want to do landscaping, advertising specifically for landscapers?
Yeah. So I, like many of the people listening, I started my business in 2009 during there was a recession. There were not a lot of jobs. I realized I didn't want to play music for a living. And I also thought plan B was journalism, but the 149-year-old paper in Denver, Rocky Mountain Times, went out of business. And no one was really hiring for people with my skills in writing. So I still recognized a need and an opportunity. So I started doing freelance social media and freelance writing for businesses. And that grew rather organically over several years into having subcontractors who did web design and SEO. And I later acquired a web development company and a SEO company. Around the time that I had kids, my business was really chaotic because I had businesses of all different kinds, from landscapers, but also restaurants and yoga studios and dentists and attorneys and software companies, e-commerce companies. And it was creating a lot of chaos for me. And I worked with a business coach who helped me realize I needed to niche down. I needed to pick something. And around that time, I spoke at a garden center trade show, and I got a garden center client who just emailed me like yesterday that they wanted to hire me again. And they hired me like, this was like 12 years ago, and we stopped working together for a period. So it was cool to hear from them. I got a garden center, an arborist, and a landscaper, and I worked with them, and I loved working with them. I could just speak their language, and they got great results. And I presented those results the next year at that garden center trade show, and I got even more clients. And before I knew it, about 40% of my clients were landscape industry clients. And I realized that I made money helping them, I enjoyed working with them, and they got great results. That was how I ended up deciding to go all in on it. And it's become a passion of mine to create this podcast and share stories. And I feel rewarded by helping these small businesses generate results in their business that change their personal life. 20 years ago, I would have never thought that I'd have a landscape marketing company, but we're in year 16 of my business, and over half of them have been in the landscape industry. And that goes back to my point about taking opportunities as they come. I got here by getting started, by working with people and figuring out along the way, who do I like, who do I get results for, what am I actually good at?
Yeah, it reminds me of what my dad always tells me that, when he was first out of college, like he tried a lot of things, but he ultimately found what he's passionate for, which is landscaping, as you know, and he pursued it and he never gave up and he built his company to where it is today.
Yeah, it's cool. I got to spend some time with your dad, and I didn't realize that he had a finance background. That was his career out of college, and realized he didn't like it and went back into landscaping, which was, his parents, he grew up around it.
Yeah. His finance background has also really helped him with his company, and without it, his company wouldn't be the same.
So Ashley, you also have a nonprofit. What is it called, and tell us about it?
My nonprofit is called Click with Kindness, and anytime someone buys my book, all the money goes directly into my nonprofit, and all the money goes to a foundation called the Cybersmile Foundation, which helps raise awareness for cyberbullying.
Cool. Well, so folks, you got to buy a copy of the book and support this amazing cause. Well, Ashley, thanks so much for coming on the Landscaper's Guide. For folks listening, go to ashleybparker.com. We're going to put that in the show notes. And Ashley, congratulations on your book and congrats on all your success. Keep going.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you did, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we'll share weekly sales, marketing, and leadership inspiration to grow your snow and landscape company. I'm Jack Jostes, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Landscaper's Guide podcast. Now, normally we and that'll go in the blooper, so I make mistakes too. All right.